And can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Shanna, are you on?
I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Am I super loud?
She's in beautiful Las Vegas.
Place.
She's in beautiful Las Vegas. Like,
I'm in 110 Las Vegas.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, so just as a introduction, we just wanted to bring forward this training just to kind of go over what is the Board of Pardons. I know that I've been with the board since 2005, and when I got here, I had no idea what it was, and I talked to people every single day that is like, I didn't even know your agency existed. And these are people that are in like the law enforcement community. I mean, these are people that have no idea what we do, and they probably should. So hopefully me and Laura can put together some type of ongoing presentation where we do hit all the victim advocates in the state so that they can pass along that information. So my position at the board is I'm the board victim coordinator. My job is to make sure that victims get notified of all the hearings that take place. I research updated victim contact information from what I have. I give victims required notice, which is 30 days. I'll also answer any questions for victims, preparing letters or just procedures of what the board does. Appointments to discuss specific concerns. I do those things, even though I'm a coordinator and not an advocate. I can still give them some sort of direction of what the board is looking for when they're putting their victim impact statements together. Most of those that need, that extra step or that extra attention, I do refer to Laura, since she is the victim advocate. She doesn't work for the board, so that's kind of her area, which she'll talk about. I'll also attend hearings with victims if they request. Laura's been kind of taken over that position a little bit, since again, she is a victim advocate and does not work for the board. She can actually advocate for the victim. But basically my job is to make sure that the victims know about the upcoming hearings, get them settled with an appointment with not really an appointment, know when the hearing is, let the hearing officers know that they're coming if they're speaking. Right now we do virtual or in person, so that's something I arrange with them so that the hearing officer and the prison knows how they're attending, if they plan on speaking, how many people will plan on attending.
So hi, my name is Laura Flanagan. Can you guys, okay, I'm just making sure you guys can hear me. I have a headset in that I've not used before. So as Shanna said, I'm a victim advocate and I do not work for the Board of Pardons and Parole. House Bill 177 was passed in 2018 for my position because families went to legislation and said, hey, you know what, we really do need a victim advocate to help navigate the board. And I will honestly tell you, when I first got this job, and I've been in the field for a good 20 years or so, on and off, I didn't really know what the board was and didn't understand the board at all. I've learned a lot in the past few years that I've been in this position. So it took 2 years for a team to develop this position. The board was part of that team that developed this position. I started this position February 24, 2020. I will never forget that because I moved into my office and then 2 weeks later I was told, oh, you got to go, COVID. Do I really still have a job? So this is a relatively new position and not a lot of people know about me. A lot of victim advocates don't know and a lot of victims don't know about me. I am considered a community-based victim advocate, even though I do work for the state. So I fall underneath that privileged communication that we were talking about earlier in this training. I do provide assistance. Shannon and I work really, really well together. I can advocate, and some of the differences is, and I just want to bring this up, so if a survivor, I had a survivor that didn't have a representative to speak on their behalf and wanted me to do it. So I was able to do that, where Shanna can't do that because she works for the board. So I was sworn in and I read this victim impact statement verbatim, what they asked me to read at a hearing for them because they mentally couldn't do it. You know, they just couldn't do it. So that's one of the biggest differences between the two of us, is that I do not work for the board, because the board, you know, works with offenders. And I'm also, you know, supposed to provide training, like Shanna said, to victim advocates through the state, and also help the board implement, you know, trauma-informed practices with the way they're interacting with victims, which we have been putting new things in place. And I will tell you, I attend a lot of hearings, and the hearing officers and board members have become a lot more, from when I very first started, they've become a lot more trauma informed with the way they're speaking to victims, and they're really, really kind. And so I just wanted to say that. So I'm going to let Shanna take over, and then I'll talk to you guys in a minute.
So just as a little FYI, this is just a little history thing that you can read the rest of it on our website, but the Board of Pardons was established soon after Utah became a state in 1896. It consisted of the governor, the 5 Supreme Court justices, and the Attorney General. Today, it consists of 5 board members, and we have 11 hearing officers that all conduct hearings. Now, the difference between a board member and a hearing officer is the board has 5 full-time board members. They are governor appointed. They come from various legal backgrounds. Right now, I believe we have 2. We have somebody that came from, it was a defense attorney. We have a prosecuting attorney. We have someone from, you know, the Sentencing Commission, and another from juvenile, and another from APMP. So they definitely come from various legal backgrounds. Board members can conduct hearings, and all 5 vote on each hearing that is held. And this is a majority vote, and will also include any other situation that may affect the offender and their release, which include like paper reviews, administrative reviews that come in, which are usually the death cases where they have to set those hearings way out. Any special attentions, anything that has to do with the offender and something that might change a date or might affect them in the future for their future hearings. The board currently has 11 full-time hearing officers. They're not appointed positions, but all come from various legal backgrounds as well. We get a lot of APMP officers that come to the board that are familiar, you know, with the parole process. They conduct hearings to collect all the needed information for the board members to vote. They don't get a vote, but they do make a recommendation based on their review. So basically, they're the ones that they conduct the hearing. They compile all that information. They talk back and forth with the offenders, get their questions, talk to them about the programming that they've been doing. They also take the victim statements from them, either in person or in writing, and they take all of that information and they write up basically a report that they give to the board members, and each board member reviews each file individually, and they each vote individually. And I mean, the board, including like paper reviews, admin, special attention, anything that comes in like that, they're doing about 14,000 votes a year. So it's definitely a lot of paperwork and a lot of information coming through our agency. Hearing decisions. When the board makes a decision after a hearing, their starting point is the court-ordered total minimum sentence that they're given by the courts. The board then considers the sentencing guidelines established by the Utah Sentencing Commission, as well as all information that sets each case and offender apart from other convicted at the same or similar crimes. We often get the question of, well, they know somebody that did the same crime and they're doing this, so much longer than my offender. There's so many other pieces to the puzzle because every case is very different. And again, it really does go back to how they were sentenced in the court and what their guidelines are. They definitely take the victim's information or impact statement into consideration, but it really is like a big puzzle, and every single piece is something that they take into consideration when making these decisions. So how are hearings scheduled? The board sets an original hearing by majority vote after considering these items, like a pre-sentence report, a court judgment and sentence, other material available at the time of sentencing, which include the victim impact statements. they're completed on the following homicide sentences. If an offender is over the age of 18 at the time of the offense, or if it's a 25 life sex offense sentence. So basically, when the board gets an administrative review that is on these types of like a homicide, the 25 to life, they have to go over everything and set a hearing. And those are the hearings that are sometimes set 30 years out. They won't see the board. Here's like a hearing schedule. This is kind of an idea of what they're looking at. So if you have a first-degree felony and he's sentenced to 15 to life, his original hearings is going to be held around 12 years in prison. So those are what they look at. So the 10 years is 7, the 10 to life, over 10 to life, you know, the 3 years in prison. The 3 to life, 12 months. So when people are really like, people will call me and say, he barely got in prison. Why is he already going before the board? This is what they look at. So if he's in there on a 2nd-degree sex offense that he got up to 15 years, he automatically goes to the board at 12 months. And so on, like the others say, like a 3rd degree, she automatically goes to the board at 3 months. It's a set schedule. Every single offender that gets sent to prison and is under the jurisdiction of the board will see the board at some point. It's just a matter of how they were sentenced and how they fall on like the hearing schedules of their cases. So we have a few types of hearings. We have an original hearing, which is their very first hearing before the board. Again, those are set by that hearing schedule. And sometimes they're set for those homicide cases or those 25 to life, you know, further out than that. We have a victim impact hearing. So a victim impact hearing is something that can be requested by a victim. If an offender is scheduled more than 3 years out, the victim can request a victim impact hearing where this hearing is for the victim. The offender is there. They get to speak at this hearing. They can have family members, whoever they want, submit letters to this hearing. And the whole point of them wanting this hearing is if you have somebody, you know, that's maybe you have an elderly mother that lost a family member, and they want their input at the board. They want it in that permanent file. So whatever they tell us at that hearing will go in that permanent file and will be reviewed by board members in 25, 30 years, whenever that's set out. You have a lot of families that say, I want to talk now. And we have families that say, I want to get my piece in now. And then, you know, I don't want to talk about it again, but I want the board to have my say in there in 25 years in case I'm not able to be at that hearing in 25 years. A rehearing is what is set after original hearing. So if an offender does not get a parole date, they get denied parole, they will be scheduled a rehearing somewhere down the road, just depending on where the board sees fit. And a lot of times they'll ask for those rehearings with maybe continuing programming or a psych review, or they'll want them to be disciplinary free for this long. So they set those rehearings. Again, the victim is informed of those rehearings, and they will come to that hearing again, and they will give their victim impact statement again and let the board know, this is how I've been doing again, you know, this is what I've been doing, or maybe I've had more counseling and I need more, I'm asking for more restitution. So it's another opportunity for the victim to speak to the board again as well. And then a restitution hearing is usually held either at a victim's request, the board's request, or an offender's request. And those are usually held if there's some discrepancies in the restitution, or the board isn't quite sure what an amount is, or the offender can request a restitution hearing if they don't agree with the amount that is being put on them, and then they'll hold that restitution hearing. Parole violation hearings are pretty self-explanatory. It's if they're brought in on a violation, the board has to hold a parole violation hearing. Those are held every single Wednesday. Is just set for parole violation hearings. A parole violation / original hearing, that is if the offender has been brought in on a parole violation, but he also has picked up new charges. So the new charges, we'll wait for those to be adjudicated by the courts. And then it will be called a PVOH, which will be treated like it'll be treated like an original hearing. They'll go over his violations, but they'll also go over the new charges. Now, the difference in a parole violation and a parole violation original hearing is we do not notify victims of parole violation hearings. They can talk. We get a lot of DV victims for parole violations, and they might be his or her victim for previous crimes. And so they definitely are allowed to speak at the hearing, but we don't notify of those hearings because there's usually quite a fast turnaround. Like, I don't get the file in enough time to even let those victims know that there is a hearing going on. The PVOH hearings, which is a parole violation original hearing, we do notify the victim if there's a victim in those new charges. So if he picked up a theft charge on his violation, I would notify the victim of that theft charge to let them know that there's a hearing. And pardon hearings, the victims, I mean, these pardon hearings, they can happen so long down the road that they're another one that it's really hard for us sometimes to find the victims, but victims are notified of those pardon hearings. And, you know, just as a side note, we notify every type of victim. You know, if you got your purse stolen and it was part of a theft, you get notified. It's everything. If you got your bike stolen and it was part of that theft crime, you're going to get a notice. So it's not really the violent crimes or, you know, the sex abuse crimes. We notify everything. I will have like a communications fraud offender that will have 200 or more victims, and we notify every single one. So I'm sending out probably 200 to 300 letters a month because we do notify every single offense, which, you know, that's what makes it a little bit harder to be able to track everybody down. So part of our process is the disclosure to offenders. So unique only to Utah by this Utah Supreme Court, the board must provide offenders copies of documents and information that will be reviewed for a decision. This will include victim impact statements. So victim contact information, we take all of that out, email addresses, anything that would tell the offender any personal information about the victims. We have a disclosure group that definitely redacts all of that. They take everything out from phone numbers, addresses, emails. Content of statement is shared. So they do get a body of that letter. So everything that we receive, they receive. The victim name change from time of offense needs to be shared with the board. So a lot of times, you know, if somebody gets married or whatever, I'll change it in our system, but I'll also put in parentheses that the name that they want to go by or that they went by, because I think there's a lot of times that I don't really think it's the offender's business if, you know, they have a new name or a new married name, because a lot of time that's part of, you know, relocating and part of their safety plan. So it's not, we put it in our records, but it's not something that we would release to the offender if the victim does not want them to have their new married name. I make sure every single time to let the victims know this disclosure to offenders is very important, because a lot of victims won't read that part somewhere. They don't, they're focused on, I need to get my statement on, I need to get that hearing. This doesn't even cross their mind. So this is a really important one to let them know that he does she does receive everything that we receive. And by law, the board cannot take it into consideration if that offender has not had an option to read the material. So this is an important one for victims to know.
I guess I should unmute myself. I live in Layton and just for flying by, so I didn't want you guys to hear them when I was talking.
And I can't remember where you were taking over.
Yeah. So I want to kind of piggyback on that last slide. So when I'm working with survivors, I talk to them, about the offenders having anything, written statements that are sent in. And sometimes they're like, oh, I don't care, I want them to have this. And sometimes like, we don't want them to have this. I mean, I have a case that I'm working on that's a stalking case. And she's like, well, why would I want him to have a letter that he can just stew over while he's in prison and then come get me when he's out? And so they won't write victim impact statements because of that. And so that's where they can just, testify, virtually or in person. Now, the offender can request an audio of the hearings, though, right? And
Yes.
so they will have that audio with the testimony of the victim. So it's really, really important as a victim advocate, if you're talking to victims about hearings, that you let them know this so that they know. Because I have had some victims not know that, and they were really quite upset when they found out that the offender got the statement. They were not happy. So I'm just going to kind of go over this one briefly because I'm going to be talking about this stuff throughout the rest of this presentation. So what victims have a right in regards to hearing? They have a right to attend hearings. They have a right to provide written statements, impact statements during hearings, the restitution and communication. So Shanna kind of covered that a little bit already. So when we're talking about in-person hearings, they are conducted at the prison. So they are conducted right now in Draper. They will be conducted at the new prison in Salt Lake City. I will meet with the survivors probably like 10, 15 minutes before the hearing, kind of go over with them, what to expect. I walk in there with them, we sit and talk. I always let them know because sometimes I can't attend them with them. I have one coming up next week, which I'm going to Costa Rica, so Shanna's going. So we tag team and we're helping each other. But I always let them know, what does this environment look like? I will tell you, when I very first started this job, I actually had the privilege of sitting at 3 days of all day of parole hearings, all day. Tuesdays and Thursdays are when they do, hearings, and Wednesdays we do the parole violation hearings. And I sat for 3 days, all 3 days. And when I very first went in there and I went to the gate and it shut behind me, I was feeling a lot of anxiety. I mean, I was new in this job. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was walking in this prison and this gate shutting behind me. And then I have to go through security system. I was feeling really, really anxious. So I can just imagine, what a survivor's feeling when they go in there. They're feeling really, really anxious. So I always let them know, this is what this looks like. This is what it feels like. This is what it sounds like. Now, I don't know what it's going to be like at the new prison, where this is going to be an experience we're all going to experience together. Maybe Doug knows what that looks like, but I don't. So I always prepare them for that. And I always tell them, you have to bring an ID. You can't take your personal cell phones in. You can't even have Apple Watches or anything on in there. They won't let you have them. Hearings are usually scheduled for 20 minutes. And so they allow 5 to 10 minutes for survivors to speak. I will say that some survivors have gone over, and the hearing officers and board members are great. I mean, they're not going to say, stop talking. It's really hard because they have a schedule, but I've only had it happen one time where it was going over, but I always try to prepare them, and a lot of times they'll say, hey, Laura, this is what I'm going to talk about. Can I go over it with you? What are the points I need to make? I do, and I probably am going to get ahead of myself. I always do, but I always recommend, if they are going to talk, do they still write a victim impact statement as well? Sometimes I'll read them verbatim, or sometimes they'll just say what's on their heart. So victims can make a statement with the offender in the room or out of the room. When they get in there, they fill out a form, and they'll say, do they want the offender in the room or the offender out of the room? So I prepare them for that. Do you want them in? Do you want them? Sometimes they're like, I want them in at the very last minute. They don't want them in there. And so there was one time when they said, yes, I want them in. And then at the very last minute, they're like, Laura, I can't do this with him. And so I was able to get the officer, I think it was Scott, that was there, and said, they don't want him in here. So they changed their mind at the very last minute. They were so wonderful to have us leave, remove the offender, and have the survivor come back in. So I always let them know, even at the last minute, if it's something you feel like you don't want to do, just let me know. We can stop and we can have the offender leave the room. So they've been really good about that. So when we're talking about virtual attendance, so I'm going to say, I don't like COVID. And Doug, I'm so sorry that you're sick, but I'm so glad that you're here with us today. One good thing that has happened with COVID is the virtual piece of the hearing. That wasn't something that we had when I very first started this job. And this was something when I very first started the job that I was really advocating for and talking to the board about, we need to have another way of these individuals attending hearings. I don't feel like just them having to go to prison and just writing a victim impact statement. They need to have options, right? We need to provide them options. And so now we have this option. This is something that we're going to keep. It's not something that's going to go away. When we very first started this, we didn't know what we were doing, like most people, right? When COVID hit, we just kind of tried to figure it out. We were calling the survivor. Shannon was calling the survivors. I was calling the survivors. They were on the phone. They were talking. You couldn't really hear them. Now a web link is provided by Shanna to the survivors. They log into that. They can see the hearing officer or the board member, and they can have that one-on-one face-to-face communication with them. They're just not talking on the phone and not seeing who they're talking to. One of the things that I want to bring up about this too is all hearings are public, and so you can go, and I'm going to kind of go over we wanted to log into a hearing today to kind of show you guys what it was like, but unfortunately they got done at 2:50 today, which I'm like, wow, that's pretty early for them. I swear they're there till, when I was there the 3 days, we were there till 5 o'clock. They were like, we're going to keep Laura here all day. We're not going to let her out. So anyways, I wanted you guys to log in to be able to see your hearing, but I'm gonna help navigate that website and show you. So this web link is for the victims only. It's not to be given to family members or anybody else. I have it. I can log in. Shanna can log in, and it goes to the victims only, and it comes from Shanna. So that's actually a really good thing. And Shanna, how do you feel about it? I feel like it's been great. I feel like it's giving survivors other avenues to, like, if they're out of the state, and they don't want to just write a letter, they can actually attend virtually now face to face with a hearing officer.
It has actually been amazing, and I haven't had any issues of anybody being able to get on there. I also always provide, the prison also gave me like a phone number with like an access code, so I provide both when they let me know that they want to speak via video, and I just tell them, if you have any problems getting on the website, you can call this phone number, put in this access code, and you can participate over the phone, listen to the hearing and everything. And I have to say, the officers that are putting it all together out of the prison, they're amazing. They'll walk people through it. They're really good. The other thing that I did want to mention, because they are live hearings, is a lot of times we do have the victim turn off their camera, and because if they don't want their face out there, it is shown on the live feed as well. So, and the officers will remind them of that. But yeah, I'm loving the video hearings.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I talk to survivors about when they're live is we have a lot of media people on the live, and sometimes there's a chat box, and sometimes they want to chat. So I always tell them, tell your family members if they have questions not to put it in the chat, because you don't know who's on there on the live. And like I said, when I go to the website later on in the presentation, I'll show you how to get on there, because you don't know who's watching. So I have my cell phone with me, and I have family members. There's background. Can you guys hear that, or is it me?
It was somebody we needed to mute, but we got him muted.
Okay, I'm just like, is it me? Okay, I got a new puppy, so I didn't know if he was like trying to get in the door or not. So anyways, I mean, I have my cell phone with me, and I have sometimes the survivors' family members are texting like, Laura, what's going on? Like, we want to know, and sometimes people are trying to talk to the hearing officers or board members on the live, and they can't hear them. They can't hear you. You can't talk. Like, so there's some of those issues, but I really do like this. And also too, we're not transporting offenders around as much with this option, right? And I think that that's going to be another thing that we're going to keep, and it also saves money too that way too. Accommodations are provided for all hearings. We had a survivor who was deaf, and we had to get an interpreter. We have, survivors and offenders that need interpreting for language. And so when you're working with a survivor, we just need to know that, so I can tell Shanna so she can put that in that accommodation, and we can work on those accommodations for the survivors. I don't know what's going on with my slides. Okay, it will go and then it won't go. So when we're looking at the victim impact statements, a lot of times when I'm talking to survivors about this, they're like, well, does the board already have my victim impact statement from the courts? And I want to say yes. I hope that they have them, right? But I also talk to them about, what is the board really looking for in this victim impact statement? And there is a template that the board has that I actually will email, and I'll send them. And I just say, hey, here, this is a template. You don't have to fill it out verbatim, but this is kind of what they're looking at. And what are they looking at? What they're wanting to know is, how has this impacted you since the hearing, right? A lot of times, and a lot of times too, survivors think that it's like a court thing and that the board's gonna like make them, it's not, they're not, the case has already been adjudicated. They've already been sentenced. We're not having another sentencing hearing, right? And so I have to explain that to them. That's not what this is. So you wrote your victim impact statement for the course and how, it affected you, the crime affected you. How is it affecting you now, right? Like, do you, like Shannon said, do you have PTSD? Are you in therapy? A lot of times too, I will honestly tell them, and I'm very truthful with them. If an offender's not sentenced life without parole, they are going to eventually be paroled, right? It's not a matter of when, if, it's just a matter of when. And so what can you put in this victim impact statement to request from the board to help you feel safe? Even though I know they're like, well, I'm never going to feel safe, Laura, with this person. I really do understand that. But what can you ask for in a parole agreement to help you feel safe? For example, like the GPS monitoring system. Obviously, Doug talked about on the parole agreement, no contact, going to be in there. It's always going to be in there, whether a survivor likes it or not. And we have had many survivors get mad at the board. They don't like it. They don't consider themselves a victim. They want to have interactions with this offender. And I'm really honest with them. I said, you know what, if you have interactions with this offender outside of approval from APMP and a therapist, they are going to go back to prison. They will go back to prison on a parole violation because you had interactions with them. This is how you have to navigate that. Shanna, I can't remember, I had a case though that came up right when I very first started, and there was 10 victims, and it was a homicide, and dad was older and he was getting out. Well, half of the victims of record, which were her siblings and then the children of this family, half of them wanted contact with the offender and half of them didn't. And they were angry because they're like, we are adults, we are in our 50s and 60s. Why are we considered the victims of record? He's getting out of prison. He's not going to have a place to live. We want to help our dad. We want to help our dad. And I had to advocate for 10 different people and what they wanted in terms of contact with their dad. And so for this one, I just said, hey, you know what? I think every single one of you needs to send an email to Shanna or to the board coordinator. She will route it to the board with what your intentions are and what you want. And when we talked, I said, we really need to spell this out in a parole agreement, because if he has contact with Anna and Anna doesn't want contact with him, then she's going to call the parole officer, which victims have a right for that information from the parole officers, which I do provide them. And I also provide them a copy of the parole agreement. They have a right to that. Then he's going to be on a parole violation. He's going to go back to prison. But Susie wants to have contact with them. So in this parole agreement, the board spelled it out with who he could have contact with and who he could not. So it was spelled out, which is not something that they really do a lot, right, Shanna? Like,
right. And on that note, the parole agreement, like the standard parole agreement reads, no contact with victims unless approved by APMP. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you do have some victims, I mean, we get a lot with the domestic violence ones that want, to have contact. Basically, we tell them, you're going to need to work with their agent because it is in the standard parole. The board can't change that. Like Doug said, that's just something that is in the parole agreement, but it does say unless approved by APMP. So that is something they can work with the agent.
Yeah, and that's something that I tell them too. And sometimes they're not happy about it because they want them to come out and have them come live with them right away. And that's when we have the conversation that they really need to be contacting the agent and they really need to work with that agent so that this offender doesn't go back to prison because of a parole violation for contact with the victim, because they do take that very seriously. I have had a couple of offenders. I had an offender contact my survivor within 2 days of getting out of prison and asked her to bring him a cell phone to a halfway house. And when she got there, because she did it, when she got there, the people that worked at the halfway house, like, I think this is the victim. And he got picked up and went right back to prison. They do take that very seriously. APMP does. So when I'm working with survivors, I do advocate for them with what they want, but I also tell them too that they really need to be working with the APMP officer to get that permission before they have contact with the survivor. But like I said, in this one case, though, the board did, because the one daughter actually had to take her dad to have him come live with her because he didn't have a place to live. And so they did specify that. And that was like a special conditions, right? One where he was in his 80s and he couldn't find a place to live. And the daughter did take him. So she was written down as not a victim and the ones that wanted to be a victim on that were written in. They sometimes they don't put their names in, but on this one that they did, so we advocated for that. So who can speak at a board hearing? So a victim of record. So victims of record, Shanna, the board takes the victims of records from the police reports, correct? That's where the victims of records come from. So that's why, and this one that I was
whoever
about,
the offender was charged with in court, whoever is that victim is the one that we take as a victim of record.
And in the case I was just talking about, his children were written down as victim of records, even though they were adults, because it was a domestic violence homicide. And in fact, that case was kind of ironic, kind of a different case, because the mom had died, and they had the funeral and everything, and the daughter that actually had him come live with her had found some stuff around her house that would indicate that her dad actually killed her mom, and asked for the body to be resumed, and they found that he actually had killed her. So that was a really different, situation there. So a representative can be designated if a victim is older than 18. And like I said, with my role, like this offender asked, the victim asked me to testify for him. If this is done, then the victim needs to write a letter to the board, right? And need to send it in saying that this is a person that I want to represent me in this case. They need to let the board know. Obviously, if the victim is deceased, then their siblings or spouses or anybody that's still alive can testify at hearings on their behalf. So victim notifications, we've kind of already talked about that. Doug, I was like, Doug, you took half of our presentation. Did a good job talking about this. There has been a lot of stuff in the news, and it's very, very disheartening, and it's very heartbreaking to all of us. The one case that came up that actually where the subcommittee came from was very, very disheartening, and it was very, very sad. And I worked with this family through a therapist that she's actually on our subcommittee, and I've been communicating with this family through that. Shanna did send 2 notifications, I think, to this family, right? Or was it 3?
I actually sent 3, and because I use a program, I use Claire, and I can put in last known addresses, and it will bring up the current one. The problem with this one was I had sent out like a letter in April. They had moved a few times, and so I was actually sending letters to old addresses and new addresses, just trying to cover my bases, because the board wants to hear from them. So it's something we definitely do as much research, as we have time for, or that we, to the extent like the Claire program, I'll put it in 10 different ways just to make sure I get something current. And on that case, it was hard, because I feel like I sent out 4 letters. I did everything I could, and it did not make that to him at any time.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that we're doing too now that's new is we're putting emails in the system, and Shanna's like sending an email to them as well. So we're trying to email if we have letters, sending the letters and emailing them as well too. Is that something that we're working on trying to do, so that we're notifying, and just a couple more ways other than just the mail system. So we already kind of went over when they're going to get notified. And I'm gonna bring this up with Vine. I have a love-hate relationship with Vine. It's just my personal opinion. But when I'm talking to survivors, I always talk to them about the limitations of Vine. And what happened with this family is they had updated their phone numbers and stuff with Vine. So they just had the assumption that because Vine had that information, the board did, and the board doesn't. As we learned today, Vine's a third-party notification system, and it doesn't talk to the board. The board did not have that information. And there are times too when it's very difficult, because what if you have a survivor that doesn't want to have interactions with the board? I have one right now that's like, I do not want to know about anything. And I'm like, can we have something in our little system with a checkbox that says victim does not want to be notified of this hearing? And then at any point in time, if they want to change their mind, then they let us know. But she's really, really adamant. In fact, she was working with Nora, who is the victim advocate for the Attorney General's office. and they subpoenaed her, and she was very, very angry. And so Nora called me and said, Laura, can you please come talk to her? She won't talk to me because I'm a victim advocate. And I said, sure, I'll come down and talk to her. So I kind of stepped in to help Nora because her agency was the one that was, subpoenaing her to testify. The offender was her brother, and her child was the victim in a sexual assault case. And she was very angry, and she's like, I don't want any notifications from the board at all. And I'm like, okay. So her name is in the system as a victim of record, but there's no addresses because she doesn't want to be notified. But there have been times when the board has sent out letters, Shanna, and survivors have called very, very upset because they didn't want to get notified.
Well, because I found them on Clear. They
Mhm.
hadn't updated their information in our system, but I found them on Clear, so I sent it to their new address, and they were like, how did you find me? This is an invasion of my privacy. Like, it was, so it's like, I'm kind of, it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, but it's like, I don't want to, out of those handful of victims, just assume they don't want contact. So it's like, I'm checking every single one.
Yeah, and so this is another thing that we're working on too in our system, that we look at this stuff like, is there a way we can change the system to check a box to say this victim does not want to, or make notes, I talked to this victim on this date, they do not want a notification. So in this one, like I said, there's not an address in there, but if Shanna goes to find this person and clear on their address, then the victim may be upset about getting a letter. So that's something we're working on internally that we need to work on to try to change in our system so that we can, note that. So I just wanted to go over this Victim Bill of Rights brochure. I'm hoping.
Sorry,
go
Laura,
ahead.
can you go back one more? I just wanted to touch on something really quick on the last slide.
If I can go back, I don't, my computer's being weird. So I might not be able to go back. Oh, there you go. Okay, got
Okay,
it.
so the third bullet down, initial notification sent on first degrees if the hearing is set within the next 3 years. So the next one, so those are the hearings that I was talking about, like a victim impact hearing. So if an offender is sent to prison on a first degree, and he gets set 25 to life or whatever, then they will set they'll do an administrative review. They will set that hearing, and it might be 25 years out, right? And so I will send, if an initial letter is sent on first degrees, if the hearing is set within the next 3 years. So if they're sent in on a first degree, but they're going to have a hearing because they're, oh my gosh, what am I trying to say? Their hearings within the next 3 years, I'll send in an initial notification letter that says, hey, it doesn't say this, but it says, just a heads up, he's having his hearing next year, or he's having his hearing in 2 years. On that letter, it says, just so you know, this is his tentative date. Make sure if you move or anything that you do contact the board to get us that information. If the hearing is set more than 3 years out, I send what's called a victim impact notification. And that's the letter that says you can request from the board a victim impact hearing due to the fact that this person's not going to see the board for another 20 years. So if it's anything more than 3 years, they are getting like a victim impact notification. If it's a first degree and it's within 3 years, they're getting an initial letter, just kind of giving them a heads up so that they're not getting that letter 30 days prior and going, this came out of nowhere, and it also is kind of a way for us to say, this is when his hearing is going to be. If you moved, let us know, because you're going to get a letter for that exact date and time of that hearing.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just added this today, Shanna. I didn't.
Oh no, you're totally good.
So this is kind of where I'm coming in to ask for help from victim advocates with the notification, with our notifications to victims. And I did take this right out of the Victims Bill of Rights brochure that the Utah Office of Crimes put out. And I'm really hoping that all of you are giving this brochure to the victims. Every time I'm working with a survivor, I give it to them. But this is the section about the Board of Pardons and Parole's responsibility to victims. If you go through that whole entire 13-page thing, there's different sections, and this is on page 8. So I just kind of wanted to pull this out. It's really talking about a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, what the board's responsibilities are to the victim. But I want to say, again, we need to empower these victims and let them know, hey, you know what, you do need to notify the board, and it says it right there in the brochure, and in the 13-page brochure. Number 8, the victim should keep their address and phone number updated with the Board of Pardons to ensure timely notification. Update contact information. I'm sorry, I can't see that because I've got my little thing out. Can be submitted by contacting the board. This information is never released to the offender. So as victim advocates, we really do need to be, you know, talking to these victims and letting them know that they need to be, you know, in contact with the board. Like Doug said, this can be done by emailing Shanna. They can email me. They can get on the board and send the website and send an email with their updated address. So right now, it's very, very important as victim advocates that we are letting them know that you know, they need to be responsible to share their addresses and phone numbers with the board. So how can victim advocates help with the process of notification? So this is where I'm just going to say, so in the short time I've been in this position, I actually started, like I said, in February 2020, and I didn't have interactions with the survivors until the September after that, because COVID hit and we were really trying to figure out with the board, you know, what does this look like? What is Laura's role? How does this look? And so it took a little while for me to start interacting with survivors. But since that time, this is what I'm seeing. And this is where I'm asking for your help. What I'm seeing is, and I always use the analogy of a funeral. I like to use analogies. It feels like, you know, it's like a funeral, and as you're going through the court process, everybody's there. The victim advocates are there. You're feeling, you know, everybody's there, just like a funeral. And then all of a sudden that court process is done, or the funeral is done, and then you're there by yourself, and you're sitting there, and you're alone, and you're thinking, like, what's happening now? And as we know, these survivors, I call it trauma brain. They have trauma brain. They're not going to remember everything that we're talking to them about as a victim advocate. It's very, very important that we're following up with them, you know, a couple of weeks afterwards, you know, a month afterwards, a few months afterwards. It's very, very important that we're following up with these victims to talk to them, because they're probably not going to remember the things that we're telling them. And the pamphlets that we're going to give them, you know, like Doug said, we've got this pamphlet that's being put together that has all of our information on it, but they might put it in a drawer and not remember that it's there, and come across it when they're cleaning, and they're not remembering because they have trauma. So I am finding, and you know, like I said, I mentioned Nora. She's the victim advocate for the Attorney General's office. Her and I work on a human trafficking subcommittee together, and she is sending me cases as soon as they've been adjudicated. As soon as she has a case that's been adjudicated, she is introducing me to these survivors, and I'm contacting them. And so I am involved as soon as that case has been adjudicated. And all the stuff that we're talking about right now, I'm talking to them. In fact, as I was multitasking with SWAVO today, I made a couple of phone calls because I had noticed that some tentative hearings had been scheduled. And so I called them and said, this is when this tentative hearing is going to be scheduled. This is what this looks like. I had one that was 2039. I said, well, you can be expecting a victim impact, you know, letter from Shanna. This is what this looks like. How can I help you? So I'm able to step in. I'm able to provide that advocacy right away to them, so that I'm, you know, letting them know, okay, if you want to register for Vine, just know that there's some limitations on Vine that we're working on. If you can get on the board's website, you know, sometimes I walk them through, you know, we have some elderly survivors that don't know how to use the internet. So if we're like, well, you just got to go to the website. And that's another thing too with the board. They don't send notifications of hearings. The board members will say, we will post it on our website. Because some of our elderly survivors don't know how to navigate a website. They just don't. They don't know how. And so, and again, the board doesn't notify those hearings. When I'm working with a survivor, I'm notifying them of the hearing decisions, and I'm talking to them and sending them the information for the parole officer, and sending them the information on the parole agreement that the offender is going to be signing. So I really do feel like, and where I'm asking you guys for help is to please, if you know that a case is being adjudicated, please send an email to me or Shanna so we can let them know. We can make sure their addresses are updated. We can talk to them. It really is working. I'm getting a lot more referrals from the last SWAVO that I was at. The victim advocates in Washington County are keeping me really busy. I've been getting referrals from the victim advocates in Cedar City. I've got one out from Vernal, and I've been getting one from the domestic violence shelters. And I just really feel like it's that warm handoff to say, hey, you know, Laura's here. Here's how she can help you. You know, and it's just they have that person that they can talk to, and I can help them. You know, like I'm going on vacation, and all the ones I'm working with right now, and I know this is a lot for me, all the ones I'm working with right now, I'm, you know, said, hey, you know, I'm going to be going on vacation, so I'm not going to be able to watch this, but this is where you can go to look at it. And if you have any questions while I'm gone, you can call Shanna, or when I get back, I can answer any questions. So I do help them by walking them through the website so that they're not relying totally on me, right? Because of what, like Rochelle said, what if something happens to you? I'm going to Costa Rica, guys. I'm going to be zip lining across the jungle. Like, I don't know. What if something happens to me? That they know where to go to look up this information. We did not give Rochelle a copy of this PowerPoint. We just got it done, but I will send a copy of the PowerPoint. Well, what I'm going to do now, do we want to go with questions now, or do we want to just kind of navigate the board's website? Do we have any questions?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, so I'm going to try to go. I actually really like the new website. Mike has done an amazing job with this website.
Yeah,
I really do like it. I'm going to see if I'm hoping it's just going to let me go right there. It's going to be really cool if it does. Oh, look at that. It did. Nice. So look at this. So this is the website, the Board of Pardons and Parole website. And you can come here, like there's this little red thing saying, you know, that they're not going to have, they're returning to virtual hearings only because obviously they're moving to the new prison, and we can't do in-person hearings while they're moving to the new prison. So the board's really good about if there's temporary things happening like this, that they will put little notifications up here on this website. So when we're looking at services, well, victims, here's victim impact statements. If you click on that, this victim impact statement is going to pull up, and this is actually what I will email them, just kind of as a template, if it will pull up to, you know, what the board's looking for in the statement. I don't know if it's going to pull up or not.
I think you have to scroll down.
Oh, here we go. It pulled up. So I do email this to every survivor that I'm working with, just kind of like, this is what they're looking for. Just, you know, some of them want to fill it out, and some of them like, oh, I'll just look at it and kind of, you know, send in my own statement. Now, hopefully I can get back to this website, you guys. I'm not really good at navigating. Okay, here we go. There's a lot of information on here. Oh, I didn't know this was here. Great. Audio requesting, so they can request an audio of the hearing. They can do that here. If I'm working with them and they ask me for a request, I'm sending an email to Shanna and Allison out and requesting that. And then once I get it, I send that to them. So this is one of the really important parts here. Is this is where they can go to look at hearing types. So this is where they can go to search hearing and decisions. So shoot, I don't have an offender. I don't know an offender number right offhand. Shanna, do you? Oh wait, you're not in your office. I'm like, I was gonna type someone in here. Okay, I know of a name though, right? And this is public record, so we're not. Okay, so I'm just gonna put this. So you can do it through offender number, or you can do it through the offender's name. So I'm just gonna put in Keith Brown, and I'm gonna push search on him. And as you scroll down, where is he? Where is he? I don't know what's not working.
Not pulling up.
Huh? Usually it will pull up.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Okay. I just had to be patient. So this is going to tell you, like, this is what his offenses are. He had an original hearing in 2018. This is what the decision was made by the board on that hearing. He had another one in 2020. This was the decision that was made by the board. So you can look that up. And then this is when his next rehearing is tentatively scheduled for. It's not scheduled yet. So a survivor can go on here and they can type this in, and they can look at this at any point in time that they want to. So this is very empowering for you guys to, you know, let them know this, help them navigate this, so they can look at this if they want to look at this. So that's that for the hearings. And then live streaming hearings.
They added that live broadcast right underneath the
what?
See, it says live broadcast. Sorry, go up.
Oh.
Mike just added
right
there.
here.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That was new. Like that wasn't there
Yeah.
before. And I go here all the time. Like, so
Yeah,
I guess
that's brand new.
you can just go to live broadcast, and if there was a hearing right now, we could log in. I will say that I will, if I feel like I let survivors know that if they feel like they want to listen into a hearing so that they know what to expect, that they can. I just want to make sure that if they do, I'm like, do you want me to log in with you? These hearings can be very traumatizing. I don't want you to be, if you're traumatized, please call me. But this is where you're going to log in. And if they were doing a hearing right now, we'd be able to log in. I wish we could get lucky and they actually had a schedule that we didn't know about. But they're not. And then you would just
They
join.
shouldn't be there.
Yeah, they're not there.
Yeah, and I do highly recommend that all victim advocates do this at some point. They're Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, usually from 8 to 5. But it's just to get that information that you can pass along of what to expect, what victims can expect at these hearings. And
yeah, I highly recommend it too. And there is a schedule. Where's the schedule? Oh, hearing and decisions. Wait, or is that under the decision? Why do we have hearings and decisions? I'm confused.
One's hearings.
Yeah. Okay, so hearings, search hearings and decisions. You can go there again. And then if you come down here and you just like put a date, so like next week is going to be the 21st to the 21st, and you do search, it's going to bring up a PDF of all the hearings that the board has that day. So you can open that up and you can look at it and you can say, oh, I think I want to attend. So on the 21st, they're having them from 8 a.m. to 3:20, and it tells you the offenses and the offender. Obviously, there's no victim information on here because of confidentiality. So if you wanted to get on here and look at that and say, hey, I have time in my schedule to go to see, offender number 42261's hearing, you can log in and look at that. And I would highly recommend that you do that so that you know what it is. You're going to hear the hearing officers talk about the blue packet, and that's what we talked about, that they have the disclosures in that blue packet and all the assessments, everything that they're looking at, and anything that's sent in, whether it's by the victim or the victim's family, was going to be in that blue packet. And then they go, it really depends on if it's going to be a rehearing, an original hearing. If this is an original hearing, then they're going to go over the crimes in detail. Where it's a rehearing, they're not going to go in as much detail as they did the original hearing. So if you have a survivor that you're working with, I would recommend, if you feel like that they're stable enough to have them do this, and maybe do it with them, so that they can see what this is going to be. Like I said, we were planning on doing that today, but they got done early. How dare them do that to us? Like, how rude. Okay, guys, I'm hoping that I don't lose it. There's a lot of good information on this website. Like I said, it's really user-friendly. I like it a lot. I had to give my kudos to this because it's really, really good. There's a question and answers, a frequent question and answers thing on here, right here, that talks about a lot of the stuff that we've talked about the hearings. Another thing too, and this is one of the things that, once a board makes a decision, it can't be appealed by the offender or the victim. And we probably should add that here. They just can't be appealed. And sometimes the victims are like, I want to appeal this, and I have to tell them that it can't be appealed. And a lot of times they will try to, to go to Governor Cox and appeal it that way. But there's a lot of useful information on here. It's very, very user friendly and really easy to understand, which I'm really, really glad that they did this, because the prior website was really kind of confusing to me. And so I like it to be really simple.
Yeah, he's really good.
Oh yeah, Mike did a really good job on this. I need to get him a brownie or something. What's his favorite cookie? So no, he did a really, really good, on this website. It's really, really good. So it does talk about the board members on here. So one of the things that we did not bring up, the difference between a board member and a hearing officer, the hearing officer cannot conduct a murder hearing. Those are all board members that do the murder hearings. And so hearing officers don't conduct those hearings. It will be a board member that will conduct those hearings, and those hearings are an hour long. when we're talking about when a life's been taken, they're an hour long, so they're a lot longer. And then those parole violation hearings are really quick. They're like what, like 5 minutes?
Like
if
15
that.
minutes maybe.
Like, and then they're talking about, and now I don't know how to get back to you guys. Like, I can't see. Oh my God, I'm lost. I don't know where everybody is. But they're really quick. And so, I mean, when I'm working with a survivor and there's been a parole violation, I'll tell Shanna, hey, they want to speak, and we just got a few minutes to talk, but mainly they're just talking to the offender. They have their attorney there, and the parole officer's giving their recommendations, and the attorney's giving them recommendations on those parole violation hearings. So I think that is all we have. So do you guys have any questions or?
Yeah, so
anything
that
to add?
website, you kind of went back, is right there. It's the bop.utah.gov.
Mhm.
And I don't know if the one screen showed Laura's email, and also the board does have an email just for victims, and it's the bopvictim@utah.gov. And that email is monitored daily by myself and by my supervisor. So those emails
And
get
of our-
opened every single day.
yeah, and all of our information is on this website.
Yeah.
It's all on here. Where
Somewhere.
is it? Oh, this is mine, which we're probably gonna have to change, but it's all on here. There's a link to my page and my information, and there's the BOP victim is at the bottom of this page. So all of this information is on the website as well too.
Great. I think we'll take the time and look over that website. It's been a really informative presentation. We want to thank you guys both for being here and presenting to us, and pass on the word to Mike that we also enjoy the website. So
Well, hopefully next time we can do it in person. Sorry.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
happened. So good. Well, thank you. Thanks everyone
Thank you.
for
Thank
sticking
you.
around. Our next